CNN interviewed Hasan Piker.
This is Hasan Piker.
This is my dog Kaya.
He's a social media superstar with almost 3 million followers on the video streaming platform Twitch.
Congratulations. Tiny clap. I wanted to go ahead and touch on a couple of the subjects that they talked about in the interview because, of course, those are the subjects that I'm very interested in. Now, before we begin, I want to go ahead and just define one word, which is pundit, because I'm going to be using this word quite often in this video. So essentially, a pundit is an expert in a particular subject. So when someone says political pundit, that means that this is an expert in the political field that is given an opinion. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the topics that they touched on.
One thing we've been hearing for weeks now is that the left needs a Joe Rogan.
Yeah. I don't think that the Democratic Party can podcast itself out of this issue. Joe Rogan, he endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2020. Maybe they should do an autopsy on why he left the party.
Hasan's absolutely correct. So if you guys don't know, from the point that I uploaded this video, 3 weeks ago, Joe Rogan ended up addressing himself as a progressive, for sure somewhere on the left. You guys had Joe Rogan on the left. What are you guys talking about?
I'm sure they're scrambling to try to create their own version of this show. Right. This is one thing that keeps coming up, like we need our own Joe Rogan.
Right.
But they had me.
Well, number one, they had you. Number one, they had you.
Do keep in mind that it's not the interviewer's fault. He's just relaying the message of, there's talk online about who's the next Joe Rogan. But for the people online who are asking that question, because they've even considered Ethan Klein, or even, I don't know if they've considered Destiny, but I know that they've considered Ethan Klein to be the next Joe Rogan. It's not about creating the next Joe Rogan. It's about how do you win Joe Rogan back? And I do want to go ahead and remind you guys that Joe Rogan had a lot of patience, because up until last month, he was progressive and then he flipped to Republican. Some of the events that definitely helped flip Joe Rogan to the Republican side were moments like, CNN lying about him taking horse dewormer.
Bro, do I have to sue CNN?
I don't know, do you?
They're making shit up. They keep saying I'm taking horse dewormer. I literally got it from a doctor.
Or transgender people attempting to silence him online about his transgender ideologies. But the one that I think really made him flip was the lack of communication the Democratic Party had with influencers online. As you guys know, or if you don't know, Joe Rogan attempted to bring on Kamala Harris. However, Kamala Harris wanted stipulations to be made, and she wanted to, I guess, control the narrative. That did not fly with Joe Rogan.
I think they had requirements on things that she didn't want to talk about. She didn't want to talk about marijuana legalization, which I thought was hilarious.
Why?
Like, that's so... Because of her prosecuting record.
Oh, well, I mean, that was her old job, though.
Yeah. And, she put a lot of people in jail for weed.
But here's the thing. It's not just Kamala Harris. It's other Democrats as well. They don't make the effort to communicate with influencers. Just take a look at Philip DeFranco, who attempted to reach out to the Democrats. Did not hear a word from them.
But I mean, to give you an anecdotal example, when I went to cover the DNC, there was like this whole official way to try and get access to certain politicians. We got one of the probably, I don't even know how many people we requested. But then separately, even though they told us not to do it, we started reaching out to campaigns, and we got Governor Josh Shapiro. He seemingly understood the value of talking to people in our space. We had to film the thing in some like echoey back room, but he took the time. Whereas with, I guess, likely soon to be former Senator Bob Casey, my team worked to get that interview. We had something set up, and then they just bailed on us. And it genuinely felt like they thought Casey was the get and not the other way around. That he was being given access to an audience of 18 to 35-year-old voters.
That doesn't look good optically at all. And not only that, that just shows people that you're just not interested in communicating with the folks who voted you in. Now, another topic that they touched on was how these candidates are perceived via podcasts and how it humanizes them.
There's a general sense that when it comes to the world of podcasts, alternative media, I don't even know what you want to call it, that Trump did a much better job with that than Democrats and Harris.
I was a naysayer early. When I saw the Aiden Ross collab, I thought this doesn't have motion.
So this is Trump with Aiden Ross.
When Trump went on Aiden Ross's stream, I was like, it was awkward, it was weird. But then I saw Trump on Theo Vaughn, and he started talking about cocaine, and I was like, uh-oh, this humanizes him.
Yep, and on the day that Joe Rogan episode came out with Trump, I talked about how this humanizes him and that this is going to make him look exceptionally good because we're not relying on the narratives of all of these different media personalities. I think that this is a great format for candidates to kind of communicate with the audience, so then the audience can kind of get an idea of who they are. Obviously, when we rely on these news outlets or even political pundits, these independent political pundits, we tend to draw a narrative around what they think. And unfortunately, it kind of just poisons the well in a sense. Yep. And that's a video of me when I was younger. And if you're wondering, like, aren't you like the same age? Yes, I am. But we continue to get older and we're not getting any younger. It's a joke, man. Whatever. I don't care. When you don't have a political pundit highlighting every single terrible moment and describing the candidate in such a way, you go take a look at the person yourself and you realize, oh, he's not what they describe him to be. But when you take the Kamala approach and attempt to control the narrative, you come off as very uninteresting, like she did on a Shannon Sharp podcast. I'll even show you the titles of each of the segments because I absolutely refuse to press play on a video where Kamala is explaining anything. She is so unbelievably uninteresting. But if you read some of these titles of each of these segments, it almost seems like Shannon Sharp went onto her Wikipedia page and just stole all the titles of each segment and applied them to his video. And if you're asking the question, why are you so hard on Kamala? Well, because she's a politician. She's supposed to come out here and communicate with folks. But she didn't do that. Instead, she presented this facade of a person who no one liked and tried to give off that image of someone who has two angels on her shoulder and has the devil on administrative leave. Now, another topic that they touched on in the interview was pushing back on these candidates.
Harris did consider going on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
But she didn't.
So that was a mistake as well. I think, because Joe Rogan can't deliver adversarial interviews if his life depended on it.
If you have a party with a Joe Rogan, they're most likely to be biased against another party. I mean, all you have to do is just take a look at Fox News and how they would interview Trump. They would throw softball questions. Compared to the Democratic Party, if they interview Trump, all they're going to do is just prosecute him and cross-examine him. They're going to find him guilty of every degree of murder. As opposed to Joe Rogan, who allows the candidate to express themselves without any narrative or any twisting of words. I think that's absolutely great. We need that. I would rather watch the person and how they conduct themselves than to listen to some political pundit and then give me their interpretation of another person's interpretation of another person's interpretation of Trump. How often did you hear political pundits, especially Democratic pundits, talk about how Trump is a Nazi? I'm sure that you heard it all over on the left. So yeah, I think that people should be able to cast their own judgment and what they think about a certain candidate by watching the actual source. So if you haven't seen that, well, I mean, it's already too late. The election's already occurred. But if you haven't seen it, go watch it for yourself so you can see what Trump is really like. And I highly encourage you guys, if you guys know nothing about that guy, you've only heard other political pundits talk about Trump. Even people on the right too, like they have this interpretation of Trump. Just go watch him for yourself. You'll develop your own opinion about him. But whenever there's like an interview and certain questions need to be asked, I think that that's the right time to ask those kinds of questions. But on a podcast like Joe Rogan doesn't need to push back to prove anything. Just allow him to just communicate with the candidates and let the candidates just express themselves. Let them be who they are. So yeah, I just kind of want to just go ahead and give my opinion on that. That's really all I really wanted to talk about. That's all I have for you guys. And yeah, hopefully you guys learned something today.